Hey everyone, I wanted to add my face into this just so that you guys can see it because I haven't seen you guys in a while and you guys don't normally jump into my office hours. So I'm going to throw my face into some of these videos just to make this a little bit more exciting and not as boring as they normally are. Let's go over some stuff that you guys had to do in yesterday's assignment. I noticed that a bunch of you guys had a couple questions and we're getting a bunch wrong. So let's go over some of these questions, what they look like, and how you're supposed to answer them. So this first one was writing quadratics in standard form. So that was that first section of problems that you guys had on there. And if we take this example, I pulled these straight from DeltaMath. If we have 2x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equal to negative 3. Remember, standard form, you want to make the whole equation equal to 0. So get everything to one side of the equation sign. So if you look here, we have multiple things going on, but majority of our stuff lies on the left side of our equation. So how can we get that negative 3 to the other side? Let's start by adding 3 to both sides. And I'm going to write it directly underneath this 2 because it's just 3, it's just a constant. I'm going to write it directly underneath my constant. And then that gives us, I'm going to change colors back, 2x squared plus 3x plus 5 is equal to 0. So now our equation is equal to 0. This is exactly what I want to enter in as my solution into here for my answers. All right, so if you guys have a question on how to enter that in, just let me know. It's pretty simple, easy enough to add in. All right, so that's just writing things in standard form. Get everything to one side, making your equation equal to 0. All right, solving this trinomial by factoring. Well, in order to factor, we need to first write it in standard form. So start with standard form. All right, so I have enough room down here to write it. So let's do, can I just cut and paste this? Oops. I think I can just cut and paste. Cool. I can just cut and paste it down here for us. So let's write this in standard form first. Let's get everything to one side. Let's start by adding our 2x. And I'm going to add it to my negative 12x. And then we can also do this in one step if you guys want. So add 5 to both sides. So add our constants together. So bring down what we know. We have x squared, negative 12x plus 2x gives us negative 10x plus 24 is equal to, now these both equal 0, so we just have 0 on that right side. So it's first in standard form. Now we want to factor. To factor, we want to factor this trinomial. Remember, make that x what multiplies to c but adds up to b. Well, c is 24, so it multiplies to 24 but adds up to negative 10. The only things I can think of are 6 and 4. Positive 6 and positive 4 multiply to 24, but they have to add up to negative 10, so these both have to be negative. So negative times a negative is a positive. Negative plus a negative is still a negative, so that works out. That means our two factors is x minus 6 and x minus 4 is equal to 0. From here, use the zero product property. So x minus 6 is equal to 0, or x minus 4 is equal to 0. Adding 6 to both sides gives you x is equal to 6, or add 4, you get x is equal to 4. So your solutions, remember in this, you don't have to type in anything but except for 6, comma, 4. That's it. That's all you're going to submit. There's your answer. All right, let's solve again by factoring, but in this case, let's make this first in standard form. So let me copy and paste this equation. All right, and let's do our solving down here. So solving by factoring, let's first turn it into standard form. So subtracting 5, get 5x squared plus 21x plus 9 minus 5 is 4 is equal to, this becomes 0. Good, we're in standard form. Now, the first thing that you want to do whenever this a value is greater than 1, see if you can factor it out. Can I factor out 5 from every single term? Not in this case. So, since I cannot, I have to use our factoring method of what multiplies to a times c but adds up to b. So we're going to end up by factoring by grouping. So a times c, that's 5 in our 4. 5 times 4 is 20. So it multiplies to 20, but adds up to 21. This one's a little tricky. You know multiples of 20. You have 5 times 4. Well, let's just write it as a plus. You have 5 and 4. You have 10 and 2. That's it really, right? And then 20 and 1. So which ones, if you add them together, you get to 21. Well, this one gives you 9. This one gives you 12. And this one gives you 21. So that's 20 and 1. All right. So that means that we have to rewrite this middle term. So let's rewrite this middle term. So bring down your 5x squared plus 20x plus x plus 4 is equal to 0. If you remember factor by grouping, split it down the middle. Factor out the greatest common factor. Well, you can factor out a 5x from each of these. So you have 5x times x plus 4 left over. You can't do anything here except dividing it by 1. So divide it by 1. You still end up with x plus 4 is equal to 0. Now your common binomials are x plus 4 and x plus 4. So factor those out, x plus 4. And what you're left over with is that 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. Cool, so we factored this trinomial. Now we need to use that zero product property. And we have x plus 4 is equal to 0, or 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. All right, now solve for x in each of these equations, subtracting 4. X equals -4, or subtract 1. 5x is equal to -1, divide by 5. X is equal to -1/5. So here's your two solutions. How you enter it into your answer thing on DeltaMath, remember you have to do -4, so -4 comma space, and then you have to do -1/5. To get the fraction symbol, you have to enter in that /, I guess the one that's right underneath the question mark, so that will be there for you. You can also use this little keyboard over here to help you guys type these out as well. All right, your third exercise, let's double check your third exercise is, yep, okay, solving quadratics with the square root, level 1. So these ones, all right, let's solve. So whenever you're solving, you want to keep in mind that you're always trying to get x by itself. So in order to get x by itself, well, this one's a little bit more complicated. There's a few more things we have to do. We want to get this quantity by itself first. So in order for us to do that, we want to add our constant to the other side. Right, that gives us 0 here, so we have 3 times x minus 3 squared is equal to 42. All right, so you move the constant over first. All right, now from here, you want to divide by the coefficient. So the coefficient is 3, so divide by coefficient, which in this case, like I said, that's going to be our 3. That's our coefficient. So we want to get rid of the 3 that's on the outside because we can't move it, we can't add 3 just yet. If you look at orders of operations, you have to remember that in orders of operations, you have to do what's in parentheses first, then do the exponent, and then you would multiply it by 3. So we can't do anything just yet, so we would have to divide by 3 first. That cancels out our 3's, they become 1, and then we have x minus 3 squared is equal to 42 divided by 3 is 14. All right, this is where it's a little tricky. Yeah, it's okay if we get an irrational number. We want to, because we have x minus 3 and squared, you have to do like with completing the square. Take the square root of both sides. Remember, when you take the square root of both sides, you always get the plus or minus of that square root. So the square will cancel out this. We have x minus 3 is equal to we don't know the square root of 14 without actually plugging it into a calculator. So we're going to leave this as plus or minus the square root of 14. All right, and now to get x by itself, add the constant over, isolate x. So add that constant or subtract that constant over. Remember, because one has a square root and the other one doesn't, we cannot add these. So this is only x is equal to 3 because it's positive, plus or minus the square root of 14. And here's your answer. All right, we cannot add that 14 and that 3. Remember that. So your answer up here, you're going to type in 3 and then notice that there's this plus or minus for you. Square root, there's your square root, and then 14. And then there's your answer. So if you plug that in, you guys should get the right answer. Remember, you have 2 attempts to do these. If you don't get it right the first time, click on the little question mark and it will show you a similar example, just different numbers. Take down notes on it, try to work it out, and then come back to this problem and do the second attempt if you can. Or watch the video. I noticed that some of you guys are watching a video in between. Totally cool to do. Make sure you do it. Take all the necessary steps that you guys need in order to get through these and to help you guys understand. The more you guys see it, the more you guys will understand it and learn it. I'm not there to correct you every 2 seconds to tell you what you guys did or didn't do right. So you got to take all the necessary steps that you guys can to get through these problems and to try to understand it. Even if it means calling a friend, FaceTiming them, walking through it together, you guys can totally do that. All right, so let's do completing the square with rational solutions. So completing the square, remember, we have to make sure that we have we want to isolate the x squared plus bx terms, or not bx squared, bx. We want to isolate those 2 terms to one side, so we want to get those 2 by itself. And if you notice here, well, here's our x squared, and here's our bx term, so we want to get those 2 to one side. All right, I already copied and pasted this problem down here, so let's work down here. So let's start by adding 35 to both sides. And then we have x squared is equal to 2x plus 35. Now we want to get our bx squared to bx to the other side by subtracting 2x from both sides. So we got x squared minus 2x is equal to 35. All right, now we want to do that completing the square thing. Remember, we need to find that value of c that we need to add to both sides. To find that value of c, we always want to take b over 2. Does that look a little funky? B over 2 and square it. Okay, so in this case, your b value is -2. So this c value would be -2 over 2 squared, which is -1 squared, which is just +1. So that's our c value. We're going to be adding 1 to both sides of our equation here instead of that c. So let's bring down everything else. X squared minus 2x, and we had 35 over here. All right, after we find the value of c, we want to factor. Factoring this trinomial, now we will take our x squared plus bx plus that new c value that we got. That factors to be x plus b over 2 squared. We created a perfect square trinomial, so it should factor nicely into being this x plus b over 2 squared. So this guy over here will factor to be x. Now b over 2 is at -2 over 1, so -1 squared is equal to, let's go back to our other color, 36. All right, so we factored that trinomial. That's all we had to do there. Now we can do like in that last problem, take the square root of both sides. Square root of something squared, we'll cancel that. We have x minus 1 is equal to, what's the square root of 36? Good. It'll be 6. So remember, when we take the square root of something, plus or minus every time now. I'll start docking you points if you don't put that plus or minus part. From here, isolate x, add 1 to both sides. And then we have x equals, okay, now remember, this is plus or minus 6, so we still have to write it as 1 plus or minus 6. Now, because we got rid of our square root, that means we have 2 solutions. X equals 1 plus 6, or x equals 1 minus 6. That's the plus or minus. So then we have x equals 7, or we have x equals -5. And there's your solution, which you plug into DeltaMath. 7, comma, -5. Nothing more, nothing less, just that. It'll put in those little set brackets for you. All right, so that was the rational one. Remember, you need to isolate. Here's your steps if you guys want to take notes on the steps. Isolate x squared plus bx. And then you want to find the value of c to add to both sides. And then your third step will be to factor the trinomial. And then your fourth step will be to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. Okay, that's a big part. And then your last step will be to solve for x. All right, so if you guys follow those steps, you guys will get to the answer every single time. So let's go up to, sorry, I did this out of order. So let's go to an irrational solution. What would an irrational solution by completing this square be? All right, irrational solution. What it looks like is that you're still going to end up with a square root in the end. So in your answer, you're going to have that square root. You're going to have some number plus or minus the square root. So that's what an irrational solution is. So in this case, again, we're completing the square, so let's isolate our x squared plus bx term. So I already moved it down here, so that way we can work down here. All right, so take this equation. We want to get our x squared plus bx term by itself. How can we isolate these two terms? Well, let's start by adding 1 to both sides. So we end up with x squared minus 4x is equal to 1. All right, now complete the square. What value of c is going to give us b over 2 squared? Well, remember your b is -4, so that's -4 over 2 squared, which is -2 squared, which is +4. So we are going to be adding 4 to both sides of our equation here. So that means that we have x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 5. All right, or I just added the 1 plus 4. You guys can, let's not skip steps. So 1 plus 4, there you go. We added that c value to both sides. Now after we do that, we want to start by factoring this trinomial. So taking that x squared, let's do x squared plus bx plus c. Remember that factors to being x plus b over 2 squared. Well, in this case, our b value is -4. So this factors to be x minus 2 squared is equal to 5. All right, from here, square root both sides. And these will cancel out. So you end up with x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus. We don't know the square root of 5, so leave it as the square root of 5. Now get x by itself, add 2 to both sides. X will equal 2 plus or minus the square root of 5. If you go from here and write x equals plus or minus the square root of 7, that is incorrect. That is not how you do this. Because 2 is not underneath the same radical, we cannot add those together. So here's your final solution. Write that in your answer key. 2 plus or minus, again, here's your plus or minus, and then your square root as well. 5, hit submit, and you're good to go. So any questions you guys have on this, go ahead and shoot them into our weekly discussion board for this week, or jump on a Zoom call with me if you guys need more help with these. All your YouTube videos from this week, right before spring break, they are all still available if you go to the weekly assignments layout that I kind of, or graphic organizer that I put there for each week. There's a link to all the YouTube videos. So if you missed one of them, if you want to go back to one that you had to watch on DeltaMath, you can go to that. It's in our, each week there's a graphic organizer of what you guys had to watch and do exercises on. Go into that. There's a link for each YouTube video. Go to that YouTube video and then subscribe to that channel, so that way it's easy to search for whenever you guys go on YouTube. Just go to my channel, go to the Algebra 1 videos, and you guys can view the videos that I've already recorded from before.